welcome back to Characters Like Us, a podcast where we explore the real world through diverse and inclusive storytelling in the books that we read and write. My name's Gitanshi, and I'm your host. I am a South Asian woman in her mid-20s with long black hair. Today I'm wearing a light gray sweater, and in my background you can see a couch, some white walls, and a bookshelf. I am so excited to introduce you to today's episode guest, Maya Prasad. Maya Prasad is a South Asian American author, a Caltech graduate, and a former software engineer. She currently resides in the Pacific Northwest, where she enjoys hiking, kayaking, and raising her budding bookworm kiddo. Her YA novels include Drizzle Dreams and Lovestruck Things, a 2023 Children's Book Council Young Adult and Librarian favorite. Her STEM chapter book series starts with Sejal Sinha Battles Superstorms, an OWL Awards shortlist title, and an NECBA Windows and Mirrors pick. She's passionate about creating joyful representation for kids and teens across genres. Welcome, Maya.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you on the podcast. I actually just finished reading the Singh Sisters series. I was traveling in the Pacific Northwest recently, and I had been meaning to read them for a long time. And I just thought that pairing them with that trip and reading them there would be really special. And it was.
Awesome.
So before we get started into our conversation, we'll do our opening segment, which is called Numbered Narratives. So you're going to pick a number between 1 and 30, your favorite number between them, and I will ask you a fun bookish question that corresponds to the question you picked.
Let's see. How about 17?
17. Okay, 17 is... Ooh, interesting. Speaking of sequels, what is a book that you wish had a sequel?
Oh my gosh. So many books. I'm currently reading this book called Salt Crop. It's an arc, but it's so great already. It's also about sisters, and I would love to read a sequel for it.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. What's it about?
It is a sci-fi adult. It's technically adult, but I would say it's like crossover adult sci-fi dystopian story about three sisters, and there's like a blight that has caused famine in the world, but one of the sisters has maybe discovered a secret to stopping said blight, but then she disappears, and her other sisters go on a journey to try to find her. And I don't know the ending yet, so.
Oh wow. I'm really curious. Is there, do you have sisters? Is that what kind of compels you to stories about sisters?
Absolutely, yes. I am one of 4 siblings, so I have 2 sisters and a brother. And that was definitely, one of my inspirations for writing Drizzle Dreams and Lovestruck Things, which is also about 4 sisters.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, while we're already on the topic of Drizzle Dreams and Lovestruck Things, I would love to hear, what was that initial spark and inspiration like for you?
Yeah. So like I said, being part of a big family and having lots of siblings was definitely part of the inspiration. I love the chaos, and sometimes you fight, but you always still come back together. And I think that love is something I really wanted to show. And it was also an opportunity, I think, where, we're talking about characters like us, to show that, the South Asian experience, Indian American experience, is not just one thing. So in one book, I was able to write 4 different personalities and create 4 different voices, which was really fun for me. And also explore that sibling dynamic. The other part was the Pacific Northwest. I had moved to the Pacific Northwest. Previously, I was living in San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, wow. Same.
Yeah. And I just sort of fell in love with the San Juan Islands. I actually live on the mainland, not an island, but I love visiting the islands. They are absolutely gorgeous, or anywhere on Puget Sound, really. It's so beautiful, and it just feels like a different world. And so it was really fun to write this book about four sisters whose father owns a cozy cliffside inn on Orcas Island. And they get to grow up in this place where they have panoramic views of the sea, and all these guests come in and out of the inn that they get to meet, and maybe some romantic interest in there.
I love the way you described that because I think you just, you covered the two most, even as a reader, those were the two most gripping elements. I mean, one of them, so I actually used to I was in the Bay Area and then I moved up to Seattle and then I moved back down.
Oh, okay.
But you captured, I feel like, the Pacific Northwest energy like so well. I had started actually reading it down here and like it felt so, I don't know, just like it felt like a character in the book almost. And so that's why I saved it to read while I was there, because I was like, this is going to enhance this experience.
Yes, that's so special to me that you read it while you were up here.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that it felt like a character to you, because that was definitely what I was going for. I just wanted you to feel extremely immersed in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes, it totally did. And as somebody who has I haven't spent a ton of time on the San Juan Islands, but I've definitely been there and it felt like it captured so much of the charm and also just coziness and obviously the beauty, like the natural beauty everywhere. And I do think one of the most special elements of your story in particular is exactly what you said about being able to capture these different experiences through these siblings. And I had never before read a book where it almost felt like it was four short stories within a book that were all connected. And that felt so special because we really get into the head of all of these different personalities. And I do think, speaking of characters like us, the media really, really struggles to not put minorities in like a specific stereotype or box. And it was so wonderful to see these four young South Asian women who all had really, really different personalities and interests. Like, some artistic, some not so artistic. Well, mostly artistic. I honestly, there's like one of them's a photographer, one of them's really into baking and cooking. And then you also really do such a good job at weaving in like cultural ties and what is their relationship like to their family back in India, and also what it is like for them to grow up in this environment where there aren't a ton of people who look like them. And one of the most special things, honestly, was that their dad is queer. Like that was really took me by surprise because it's actually the first book I've ever read where like there's a queer parent.
Yeah, that was really special for me to write too. I wanted to show, again, like that South Asians are not all one type of person. And obviously, there are queer South Asians. And I was trying to think of how, what kind of struggles the dad may have faced when he came here from India, because he grew up in India. And in the story, he originally had an arranged marriage, but his first wife died. And then he realized that he's actually bi. And I think that just added to the richness of his experience of that he came to the US and found like new ways to love.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think it's so sweet. You kind of briefly mentioned the love stories throughout. It was so lovely to read all of these different types of love stories throughout each of these four different sections as well. And also feel as if, I at least felt like there were little things within each of those stories that I could relate to. Like I definitely had one sister that I felt like I could relate to a little more than the other sisters. But within every single sister, I felt like, oh, there's something about her that I really feel drawn towards and relate to. Um, and it's just so beautiful. And thank you for creating this story for all of us
Aww.
to read.
Well, thank you for reading it and just, falling in love with the Singh sisters. I had so much fun writing them and just thinking about how to create these four different characters and voices.
So, you actually have a background as a software engineer, and actually, I do as well. And so, I'm really excited to chat with you about this. But I would love to hear what was your journey like? So, I believe Drizzle Dreams and Love Struck Things was your first book, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So, how did that happen? How did you transition? I would just love to hear all about your writing journey.
Yeah, so it was definitely a long one. I've been writing for 15 plus years, but I went into tech because, well, it's a very practical job and I was making good money doing it. But I've also always been a pretty avid reader. And even though I didn't really think of myself as a writer for a long time, but I always kind of enjoyed, in school when I was told to write something, I spent way too much time on it and would I just loved doing it, but I somehow didn't think of myself as a writer anyway. But as I was getting older, I wanted to see more characters like us in books. And I read some. And at the time I was reading, there were some like women's fiction books or books about women getting arranged marriages or things like that. But I wasn't really seeing the kind of book I wanted to read, like a YA, like adventure story or just like, uh, a coming of age story. There weren't too many of that kind. So that is, I think, what really got me into writing. And my first book was Drizzle Dreams and Love Struck Things was actually my fourth manuscript.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
uh, that finally sold. So I think if I knew that it would take that long, I might have given up. But at the same time, with every book I wrote, I always had encouraging signs. I always felt like so close. So yeah, the first book I wrote was also a YA rom-com, but looking back on it, I think it didn't quite fit with the market in the sense that I think the voice felt really young, and younger YA is something that has had, like, publishers haven't done a great job of trying to sell it. So I think that was maybe one of the issues, that in some ways it almost read like a middle grade, but it was about teen characters. But I found out through the process of writing it and querying it, where I was still in the tech industry at that time, so kind of just working on it. I think I wrote the first draft like between two jobs, but then I was editing it on nights and
Wow.
weekends, and querying it. And I think I learned that I'm good at pitching. So I got a lot of requests, but I got requests for partials, but not full requests. So like in publishing, sometimes they'll ask you just for 3 chapters if they like the pitch. But I wasn't getting to that next stage too much. But then eventually I did get one agent who read the full and actually sent me an R&R, which is a revise and resubmit. Um, so she had some notes on the book. And it meant a lot to me that she believed in it enough to even send me this long email with notes of how I could improve it and get it, closer to what the YA market might want. But ultimately I decided, like, to me, that book felt very much a practice book.
Uh-huh.
Like I just kind of wrote it to see if I could write a book and if I could finish a novel, and I did. But I wanted to write something a bit more ambitious, actually. So I instead of doing the R&R, I just decided to start a new book, and I started a YA sci-fi novel,
Whoa.
and it was really fun to write. And I put so much of myself into it, and it took place in near future India, and I had all these cultural elements, but it was also about a hacker. And I
Wait,
had
this
a lot
sounds
of fun.
so good.
I had a lot of fun with it. And it got me my first agent. And I queried it, and actually I within like 3 months I had an offer. I actually had multiple offers. So I was really excited about it. I thought it was going to sell because really didn't take me that long to get an agent with that one. But unfortunately, that is not what happened. I got those very close feelings. Like, one time it went to acquisitions at a certain publishing house, but ultimately it just didn't sell. And that was rough on me. It was definitely a hard one
Yeah,
because
I
I put so
bet.
much more of myself into that book, I think.
Yeah.
Then around that time, I had my first kid, and that's kind of when I left the tech industry. And I was also diagnosed with like a chronic illness. So my
Mhm.
writing definitely slowed down for a bit for several years. And it took me like 4 more years to write my next book. So now we're on book 3. And I wrote another YA sci-fi that I also really loved. And it was like an ambitious book about an even more ambitious book about about it had like aliens and wormholes and a girl who is trying to find her sister, but she gets trapped kind of in this wormhole that takes her through different multiverses, and she's trying to find her home reality and her sister at the same time is kind of what it's about. So there's a lot going on there. And I tried to up my game with the craft and the writing with that one. And I was lucky enough to get the We Need Diverse Books mentorship. So I worked
Oh,
with Padma Venkatraman on that book. And I also got this other mentorship just through social media, but another published author named Jennifer Latham took me on, and they both read my manuscript and gave me tips, and they gave me a lot of encouragement too. So it was really lovely to work with them. And I created that book, and that book was struggling. And this is when I learned that it wasn't really the book, because I got so much feedback saying that the writing was gorgeous, but again, I wasn't getting like that offer. And
yeah.
I kind of just learned that YA sci-fi is a tough market, and that
Mm.
there's publishers don't really acquire that much of it. And then even more so if you're a BIPOC author. And in fact, for that first YA sci-fi, I mentioned that we had a lot of close calls, but one of the feedbacks I got from one of the places where like the editor liked it enough to pass it on to her team. But then the team's feedback was it's a lot for the reader to take on, that it's all this cultural stuff and all this tech stuff, which obviously
Wow.
was like, wow, that's kind of racist. Okay. but,
Just a little.
but yes, the YA sci-fi is hard to sell in the first place, and even more hard to sell, I think, if you are writing a BIPOC story. So that's why I decided to pivot a bit, and I wrote Drizzle Dreams and Love Struck Things, and I got an agent for that, and that book sold. So that was my debut. So it's a long
Wow.
journey.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, the more authors I chat with on this podcast, the more we find out that it's so common that the first book you finish, the first book you write that you're really passionate about is often not your first book.
Yeah. But the positive side is I think you're improving as a writer with every manuscript. So a lot of times people will look back on their first manuscript and say, I wouldn't have wanted that to be published because it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, but it also sounds like, you faced a lot of other challenges within the publishing industry, especially after your first book with the science fiction books that were completely unrelated to how good that book was.
Yeah,
And
so a little bit of
I'm
both. But I do think I'm a better writer now anyway. But I've
I
also
feel
learned
like
the
that
hard
that that
way.
happens
I've also
sometimes.
learned the hard way that yeah, some genres are just hard to sell. Yeah.
Would you say that I'm curious with your transition from like being a software engineer to being a writer? You mentioned these mentorships that you received, but did you sign up for classes? How did you like seek out this like how to become a better writer? Were you reading a lot or?
Yeah. So I went to a writers conference that my sister is also a writer, and
Oh,
I went
amazing.
with her. It was kind of her idea to go. And that was kind of the first time I learned about like the process of querying and getting an agent, and just like how you even get into the industry, which was, before that a complete mystery, something I never really thought about. Also, around that time, blogging was really popular, and there were a ton of blogs by agents, by authors who also tell you about, how to write a good pitch, what the process is. And that all really helped me learn about the industry. But I feel like no matter how much you read about it, the next step is always kind of a wild card. And so I think once you get the agent, there's less information about what it's like to work with an agent. And then once you get a book deal, there's even less information about what it's like once you have that book deal. So it gets a little more opaque. So I think the important thing is to always have writer friends who can help you out and tell you what they know.
That makes sense because even as someone who has gone to a number of writing conferences at this point and chats with a lot of writers or goes to a lot of like workshops or classes about publishing, I only hear up until that point of like, how do you get an agent? How do you write a query letter? And you're so right in that, like, I basically know nothing about what comes after that, or like what are tips to deal with what comes after that. And that completely makes sense.
Yeah. Also, there is a book I'll recommend. It's called Before and After the Book Deal by Courtney Mom. And
Ooh,
that
okay.
one has some information about obviously after the book deal that I found very helpful. And I think a lot of debuts could make good use of that book.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll put that down in the description.
Yeah.
So not only do you write young adult at this point, but you have also written these amazing STEM chapter books for kids. Can you talk about how you got there and what inspired those?
Yeah. So the initial spark for this series, which is it's a STEM chapter book series, like you said, and kind of like Magic School Bus, in which these kids go on this like a science adventure where you learn all about a particular topic, a science topic. It started with my kid was in around kindergarten age, and they were like, Mom, is it true that it rains diamonds on Neptune? And I had not heard this fact before, but
I've never heard it either.
apparently my kiddo had read it in some like nonfiction science book for kids. And so I Googled it, and yes, it's a real scientific theory, and they've done
Whoa.
experiments in labs trying to like recreate the conditions of Neptune, and the conditions of Neptune are conducive to creating these like huge diamonds actually that rain down through its atmosphere.
Wow. Okay.
So I thought that was such a cool little fact. And I loved how it's kind of different from, the usual space facts that you learn in school. So I already had my agent from Drizzle Dreams at that point, and I just pitched it to her. I originally pitched it as a picture book, and I was like, what do you think of a picture book about this scientific theory that it rains diamonds on Neptune? And she was like, well, publishers are looking for more STEM books, and especially girls in STEM. So, she encouraged me to go for it. But when I started writing it, I realized I wanted a little more space than what is provided in a picture book. And also around that time, my kid was starting to read lots of chapter books. So I was reading them with my kid. And I also attended, speaking of writers' conferences, Write On Con, which is just a virtual free conference that takes place every year. And there were two interviews from chapter book writers. One was Debbie Michiko Florence, and Debbie Dady was the other one. So two Debbies. But they both were talking about their experience writing chapter books. And I had started to see like it was hard to find chapter books about BIPOC characters for my
Oh
kids.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I had started to see like a few trickling out, like the Mindy Kim series, and then Debbie Michiko Florence's is the wait, why am I totally blanking? Well, her series.
I'll put it in later.
Yeah. Wait. Huh. Well, I don't know why I'm blanking, but the first book is called Mochi Girl. Oh, Jasmine Toguchi series. Jasmine Toguchi. And they're both really great series about, young BIPOC girls. And so that really inspired me as well. So I asked my agent if she thought a chapter book would work. She said, at that time, a lot of chapter books or even now, a lot of chapter books are actually written in-house, or the idea came in-house from the publisher.
Oh, really?
So it can be hard to sell a chapter book because of that. But
Okay.
again, my agent felt like a STEM book, was something that publishers were looking for. So she told me to go for it. And so I wrote that. The first book I wrote was that Diamonds on Neptune book, but it actually ended up being the third book. And the reason is that I was hearing from publishers that they had, quote unquote, too many space books.
Oh.
But because my agent said that chapter books are generally a series, so we had submitted, included with our submission, synopses for like 4 or 5 different ideas besides that. And so luckily, the Alison Heller from Aladdin had a vision. She liked the idea of the stories, and she had kind of a vision for the series. So she had a call with me, and we discussed, having that be maybe a later book, but starting with one of the other ideas. So the one that ended up being the first book is Sejal Sinha Battles Superstorms. And it's about the science of hurricanes. And again, I was trying to bring in some interesting facts that are kind of different from what you normally learn. So I thought it was very interesting that in the 1960s and early 1970s, the government actually had this project called Project Storm Fury, where they tried to modify hurricanes and get them to fizzle out. So they used this cloud seeding technique that would cause extra rain within the hurricane. And it was meant to change the cycle and slow it down and hopefully make it kind of fizzle out into a regular storm. So I thought that was very cool. And even today, the other thing that I learned was that even today, there's a group in the Navy called the Hurricane Hunters, and they fly into hurricanes and they take all sorts of data, and they use that data to help inform us about how strong the hurricane might be, where it's headed, things like that. And that can help with evacuation efforts. So those kind of two interesting facts about hurricanes seeded that story. And it's about a girl named Sejal, who I wanted to bring in some Indian culture as well. So it's the night of Diwali, and they hear that a hurricane is headed toward them, and the power goes out, and Sejal is very upset that her Diwali is getting disrupted and that they might even have to evacuate. And so she has this big imagination and this cardboard box that she can turn into anything. So she turns it into a hurricane hunting aircraft and flies into the storm to learn more about hurricanes.
That's an amazing premise. It's making me want to read it because I did not know these facts about hurricanes.
Yeah. So I had a lot of fun with them.
I love that. I have already gotten the entire series for my young nieces. And so I just think it's so special because I never grew up. I grew up reading all the time. It was my favorite thing. I didn't read an Indian American or Indian character until I was in college.
Same for me.
Really?
Yes.
And it just it honestly makes me really emotional to think about what it's like to grow up and see these characters from a chapter book age. That's incredible to me. And you mentioned also that you were writing and you always read, but you never kind of thought of yourself as a writer. And I had a similar backstory, and I also always wondered why that was. And one day I just realized it's because I literally never once saw anyone who looked like me being a writer. So I didn't think I could do it.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't a path that anyone showed us, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just so amazing that you are, just even within the Sing Sisters series to see South Asian girls pursuing really creative things, I think it was just healing for me to read and see those creative things being supported. And it's really amazing also how you just combine your passion for science and of writing in your books like this.
Yeah, I thought it was so fun to do that, and I agree. it's so lovely for me to be able to get my kid to read BIPOC books and South Asian character books. And I just fill up our house with them as much as I can.
I love that so much. So you have talked about your passion for joyful representation for kids and teens, and it's obviously so apparent in everything that you write. And I'm really curious in hearing you talk a bit more about why it is specifically joyful representation that means so much to you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think whatever books I had read, that were about India or Indians or even any BIPOC characters were often, publishers put us in this little bubble of our stories of trauma and stories of like overcoming poverty or crime or things like that. And I just desperately wanted to read something about, just Indian American kids going on an adventure, falling in love, that kind of thing. Just lighthearted stuff because, nobody wants to feel, read all this heaviness all the time. Everyone wants to read, escapism is also important. And I wanted to show this more lighthearted, more normal, something relatable to most kids growing up in America today is just like these teens, the Singh sisters are very normal teens. They're growing up, going to school, they're getting crushes, they have their own passions, just like anybody else. And so it was just very important to me. And I think one of the anchors of writing both Drizzle Dreams and Love Struck Things and the sequel, Wild Wishes and Windswept Kisses, is I just wanted it to feel like I'm wrapping you in this hug. And that's what I was always thinking about. Like, do you feel cozy? Do you feel safe in this story?
That
And
is exactly what you did. I actually remember telling a friend while I was reading the first book because I actually first I totally should have known, but I had like slipped my mind that there was a sequel. And I was like, I just don't want to finish reading this book because it feels I was kind of going through a hard time. And I was like, it just feels so safe and comforting to be enveloped in this story. And then I cannot tell you how comforted I was to know that there was a second book. I was like, okay, I can keep reading.
yay. Yes.
um,
So it was lovely to be able to continue that story as well.
yeah, I love that so much. And did you know from the beginning that there was going to be a sequel?
No. So actually, I will say that the one regret I have is I wished that I had put in like a cliffhanger in book one so that more people would be like, know about book two and know to read it. But no, like we submitted it as just a standalone. And then my publisher was Disney, and the people at Disney were very excited about this story. And they saw it kind of like Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. So they were hoping, they had big hopes for it. So they wanted a second story. And so it was really their idea to do a,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
And did you feel like once you got that idea, you kind of knew what it was going to be about?
So one of the unique parts of Drizzle Dreams and Love Struck Things, as you said, was it's kind of like four short stories. I would say like four novellas, really. So I had a lot of fun with the structure. So the structure is that in each season is a different sister's point of view. Fall is, the eldest sister. Winter is a different sister. Spring, and then summer. And I just really enjoyed playing with that format and, doing something different that you don't usually read. And I always enjoyed books that have like a unique structure like that. So with the sequel, Disney told me straight up that they did not want the same structure, but I
Really?
wanted to challenge myself and do like a special structure as well anyway. The reason they didn't want to do that structure is because, like you said, like they felt that most readers would have like a favorite sister and that they wouldn't want to wait too long to get to that sister's story. So in the second book, the points of view are interwoven throughout the story. But the challenge I gave myself was to have it all take place in one day. So the first book takes place over a year, and the second book takes place in just one day. And just having that structure and kind of this like sandbox to play in is, everything's going to happen in one day. How can I make that day really important to these girls? Have them each have like an epiphany and, some major growth in just a single day.
That's incredible. And this is actually making me think a lot about the other question I wanted to ask you, which is what is your writing process like? And how do you go about ideating a story and developing it? And also, like other things about how you write, like where do you write and who do you write around and things like that?
Yeah, I feel like my writing has evolved a lot. So initially I was more of a pantser and I would just write a whole draft. And I kind of had like some like internal idea of what was going to happen in it, but I didn't write an outline, and I just kind of let the story take me where it was going to take me. And that worked I did that for like the first two books, maybe even the third book. I can't remember, but I would say Drizzle Dreams is the one that I outlined more, and I had a better idea of what it was going to be from the start. And I think that process like taught me how to write an outline, because I think one of the reasons I was a pantser and didn't write outlines is I didn't have enough of a sense of like how much was going to happen in a chapter or how much foreshadowing I needed to do in order to like, progress the story. So that's why to me, I could kind of see it when I wrote the chapter. I could see, okay, this is how much I progressed, but it was hard for me to envision it by writing, a chapter outline. But I think with more experience, I was able to do that. So I've gotten more into planning more. So I write like really detailed chapter outlines now. I still don't necessarily stick with them. I often like will change my mind and I'll be drafting and I'll just change the whole ending. But so I
Oh
kind
my
of go back
gosh.
and forth between drafting and my outline. And even now I am editing. I just finished a new YA novel and I'm editing one. I'm editing it and I am just going back to my outline. I'm like, okay, there's a lot that needs to change in the end. So I re-outline, then I write, and then I re-outline some more.
That's amazing. And okay, I have to ask, is there anything you can tell us about this new novel that you're working on?
There's not much I can say. I am not under contract, so it has been like both a challenge and really fun to write a book that's not under contract, because I can take the time I want to make it as good as I can, but also I work well under pressure, and having a deadline helps me finish things.
I relate
Like
to
a
that.
little bit of both. There's like the pros and cons on that, but it's still a romance, but there are zombies, is what I'll say. So I hope something happens with it, but I don't know for sure at this point. And I
I
have a couple other projects, and so we'll see what happens. But publishing is very much in the air right now.
I also really wanted to ask, just because of how interested I was in what you shared earlier. Do you think that those novels that you drafted, like the sci-fi ones, would ever come back and you would like try to get those published again or build off of those
I had been
ideas?
thinking of going back to one, the third one, and I had an agent who had requested a revise and resubmit for that one, and she suggested turning it into an adult or a crossover.
Oh, interesting.
And now like I said, I'm reading this crossover novel, and I think the market is a little stronger in the adult sci-fi section, although sci-fi I think is still a lot smaller than fantasy. So there are
Yeah.
more places to submit to if you write fantasy, and less
Yeah.
so if you write sci-fi. But I think the adult space is still stronger than the YA space. So I have
Okay.
thought about converting that to maybe to be an adult, or like a new adult, like younger kind of adult. We'll see. So
Ooh, that's exciting. So we've talked about, how long your publishing journey has been, and now you have so many books out, but I'm really curious what kept you going throughout, all of that time. Like what is your writing community and your support system like?
Yes, community is really important. I when I moved up to Pacific Northwest, I joined some like writing meetups and using that app Meetup. And that was a good way to meet people and get into the community. And then I started just outside of the meetups, just meeting up with people at coffee houses to write. And we would share what we were working on. And like one of my oldest friends from this area, writing friends, is Rachel Lynn Solomon, who is such a
Oh
popular
my
author
gosh.
now. She's really big and she doesn't live here anymore. She moved to Amsterdam. But we did so many writing dates together and we would just share our journey, and we both got our first agent around the same time. So
Oh,
yeah.
that's
So
really
we
sweet.
yeah.
I
So
think
it's always
often we like,
important to talk to your fellow authors and meet them, and not just online, but in person. I think it's really nice if you can have the chance to do that.
yeah, I have personally found that really, really helpful and motivating as well. And I wouldn't really have expected it, I would say, because I feel like often we view writing as such a like solitary act, or like it feels solitary when you're reading a book. You're like, oh, this one person wrote it and they wrote it all by themselves, all of these things.
Yeah.
And
But
it's not like that, and the community is so important. I love going on those little like writing dates with my writer friends.
yeah. And then sometimes you're stuck on something, you have no idea how to fix it, and you just like talk it out with a friend. And then you're like, oh, okay, yes, I have an idea of how to move forward,
Exactly.
get myself out of this little corner that I wrote myself into.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you have some favorite books or authors that inspired you or like still inspire you to write?
Yeah, I want to shout out some of my friends' books. So, um, one of my friends is S. Isabel, and her book just came out, The Great Misfortune of Stella Sedgwick, and it is like kind of think Bridgerton. It's like a period romance taking place
Love
in
those.
mainly London, and but with a black main character. So it was really wonderful to see that representation in that kind of story. But it is a very like lighthearted, fun romance to read. Another friend of mine, Linda Chang, wrote a YA horror book called Gorgeous Gruesome Faces. And
Mm.
it's kind of, it's a girl is in an Asian pop band. So if you loved K-pop Demon Hunters, like this is definitely a book that you would enjoy. But there's also horror, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
I keep getting people telling me to watch K-pop Demon Hunters. I don't know what it is, but they
It's
keep telling me to watch
it's on
it.
Netflix, and it suddenly got very popular, and my kid and I watched it, and it was a lot of fun.
Really?
Yeah. And I hear that the songs from the movie are now charting in on the Billboard.
Whoa.
So yeah.
Has your kid read your books? Any of them?
Yes, my kid has read all my books. So especially for
Oh,
the chapter books, they gave me a lot of feedback. One of the feedback like a common feedback from my kid is to put in more humor. So I'm always trying to make it funnier and have like these little antics. So I have Sejal has a puppy, a dog named Fluff Monster, which is basically based off my dog Cleo. And we always have Fluff Monster get into little antics that we think are fun.
oh my gosh, that's so sweet. And I can imagine your kid just loves having input into the stories
Yeah.
you're writing.
And then, yeah, they read my YAs too, but they weren't really, like they were kind of young, so not necessarily that into romance, but they enjoyed it anyway, just like the cozy. I think because it is like a younger, there's nothing too heavy in it, so it was something that younger kids can also enjoy.
Oh, that's so lovely. So I wanted to ask you this question before we kind of close up. That is probably like my favorite question to ask all the authors. And so the podcast is called Characters Like Us. And I am really curious to know, what would you say to someone who sees themselves in the characters that you have written?
It is always so lovely to hear from fans, and especially South Asian fans. I would just say thank you, really, for reading and for falling in love with these characters. I had a girl, like a 6 or 7 year old girl, reach out to me via email and tell me that the Sejal Sinha books were her favorite books. And it was the sweetest thing in the world. So I sent her some bookmarks and stickers and such. But it was so lovely. I've also had like a couple, like a 19-year-old girl tell me that Drizzle Dreams and Love Struck Things is her favorite book. So it is the best feeling in the world when, especially like a South Asian girl reaches out to me and says that she fell in love with these books. It's just that's the whole reason why I write.
Yeah, and you mentioned that at the beginning that this is literally what influenced you to write. And so
Yeah.
thank you for writing, and thank you for creating these beautiful stories, and for kids of all ages and also adults. I'm an adult.
Yes. Well, I'm hoping to get a little more into the adult market at some point too.
That's right.
So, yes. But thank you so much for having me. And I also wish you lots of luck on your journey of writing and creating and, spreading the stories that you want to share with the world.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for being here. This has been such a lovely conversation. And thank you for listening to Characters Like Us. You can find Maya online at Miss Maya Prasad on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. And be sure to check out all of her amazing books. I am going to put them in our bookshop page, the Characters Like Us bookshop page. So if you get them from there, you can support the podcast and also indie bookstores. To stay connected with Characters Like Us, you can follow us on Instagram at Characters Like Us Pod. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the podcast, you can consider joining our Patreon. As a paperback patron for $5 a month, you'll get access to episode-specific reading lists, monthly co-writing Zooms, and also our community Discord. Or as a hardcover hero, you can receive writing advice from each episode, help shape future guest lists, and also get personal thank you in our show notes, plus all of the paperback perks. You can find the link to everything I've just mentioned in the show notes, as well as Maya's books and Maya's socials. And thank you once again, Maya, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.